strange as ever, but we like each other, and that's
this board meeting will be done in the January meeting. There's no general introduction, or we didn't open it up to visitor input at this. They can, but nobody, I think, has signed up for it for the actual item itself. And so it's just strictly we're looking, and I'll turn it over to Kim in a minute, and we'll go through the resolution and then just a quick discussion of future board meetings. So Catherine, it's up to you. Go for it.
okay. Well, we'll officially now convene the December 19th meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Portland Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund. So you've already commented about visitors, Julie. Unless there is somebody that kind of surprised us at the last minute, let me know, and I'll assume that there's nobody to introduce. Okay, let's go on to the action item then. Sam, I assume you and Kim will take this item.
Yes, I'll defer over to Kim and just I'll add some color to her comments occasionally. Go for it.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate that. And thank you all for joining us today for this very brief but special board meeting. Our objective today is to have you adopt Resolution 551, which will permit FPDR to enter into negotiations with and a contract with Majoris MCO to provide occupational healthcare services to our plan members. We shared with you at the prior board meeting that Managed Healthcare Northwest, I get all these acronyms mixed up, but Managed Healthcare Northwest closed their doors December 1st. That left a big hole in the providers who our members would have access to treat their injuries and illnesses, occupational disability claims. And so what we'd like to do is replace it. We do have an existing MCO, Providence and Kaiser, but the purpose of adding a third MCO is to provide a broader pool of providers for our members to select and use following injury. So that's what we want to do today. And what we presented or provided for you in the board materials was just a little bit of information. And I'm going to skip around just quickly and start with the Exhibit B, which is a statement of work, because this is the foundation of what we want our managed care organizations to do for us. And so when we're looking at Majoris MCO, what we want them to do is first provide us access to a contracted panel of medical providers to provide treatment, occupational healthcare services, treatment to our plan members. That incorporates a lot of work on their end. And so what they're doing with that panel of providers, and there are 2,000 providers throughout Oregon. The majority of their providers are in the Portland metropolitan area, but different than MHN, they do have providers from coast to coast, from the upper north corners of Oregon to the southeast corners. And so for those few members that we have who are outside that Portland metro area, access to treatment is going to be greater with the Majoris MCL. So what we want them to do is provide utilization and quality management services. That means they're going to oversee the providers who are on their panel and make sure that as they're treating our members, they are using industry best practices for treatment, that they are working to make sure that the treatment moves along, that they are also championing recovery and return to work following an injury. And so that is kind of the basic of it. But what the MCO also does provide for us is a physician advisory council and quality and clinical case managers. And they're just a panel of providers who we will go to if there are any concerns about the treatment a provider has given to a member, or even if the member has concerns. Either way, if there's a concern with treatment or how things are going with recovery, we will look to those physician advisories and clinical case management nurses and services to help resolve that. And sometimes they help us deal with newer treatment, more experimental treatment, to kind of give us guidance on what that will look like for our members. So they also validate the appropriateness of a care plan, and they do effective management of disability duration. Again, our goal with any injured member is to see that they get back to work as soon as possible. And so we want our physicians and panel to align with that goal and make sure that treatment is heading that way. And we don't want to rush it. We want full recovery. These folks have, heavy jobs, or firefighters and police officers. So it's not a matter of rushing that treatment, but just making sure that the treatment is moving along to promote recovery and return to work. We want them to support our light duty program. And most of our MCOs see light duty as treatment in a way, because it does get the members up and out and moving on through their disability. So we want dedicated case managers so that they work with our staff, become very familiar with our plan and how we work. And we want them to meet with us regularly or when we need that. And again, I mentioned the assistant with facilitating early return to work, a really important part of that. And the other thing is we want them to adhere to the Oregon fee schedule. This is where we get our biggest discount in treatment cost, is by applying the Oregon fee schedule. And we want those providers to be aware of that and utilize that. So those are kind of the 1 through 7 above is kind of the broader picture. On a claim by claim basis, they do disability prevention consultations. And these are for cases where members' treatment has stalled for some reason. They've reached a point where we're just not seeing things move along. That's when a panel of physicians will come together and talk about the case, go over it with the doctor, the doctor who will in turn go over that with the member and say, what can we do to get this moving? So those services are something that we like to use. Dispute resolution services doesn't happen often, but there are times when we have concerns, or maybe even the member has concerns about a treatment that's being proposed. We want to make sure that there's a way to address that within the MCO, so that we can move that treatment along. The downside of not having an MCO is that any treatment disputes or concerns have to be addressed through the legal system. And that's just not a best practice way to address a treatment issue. Often the judges and people involved in those processes aren't thinking about best treatment practices. So we want to make sure that any disputes that we have are resolved by people who are trained, the physicians who are trained in treatment of occupational injuries and illnesses and can address the necessity and appropriateness of care. So another service that's important to our members is a credentialing or certification of non-MCO providers. Occasionally, a member will treat with somebody or will have had a relationship with a provider who has started care, and they want to continue that care with that provider. Now, we do require that members transition to the MCO upon claim approval. But there are times where that continuity of care, we don't want to break that. So the credentialing process that the MCO will allow is for that doctor to carry through. And we see this typically in catastrophic injury cases where one of our members is severely injured, and the doctors who have provided that care up to claim approval, we want them to stay on as doctors to continue the continuity of that care. So then we have pre-certification of medical services. This is something kind of where we live and breathe on the daily basis, and that's pre-certification of imaging or durable medical equipment, surgeries, injections, anything that is not your standard everyday care. They will pre-certify that to make sure it's reasonable, necessary, make sure that it's promoting, intended to promote recovery. So we use those services quite a bit. And we do like the concurrent inpatient hospital service reviews. If we have a member who's had that catastrophic injury, we want our MCO to be in on it, to look at it, to give best practice guidelines, to work with the doctors who are treating and make sure that, we're containing costs, but cost is always second to making sure that we give the members the best care possible. Let's see, we've got G here, which is prospective concurrent. So they're looking at, under that, they're just looking at our claims and treatment from all angles. What's happening in the future? What's happening right now? Are we using just the best practices to promote the members' recovery and ultimately their return to work? And then finally, with all that they are doing, we also want them to adhere to our rules, or they're there for a reason. And we want them to follow those rules and use the forms and things that both we use internally for administering the claim and with the Bureau. So the work status report is a report that our members give to the attending physician or to their doctor when they are first injured. And that report is completed to tell us, about their condition. Can they can they work light duty? What is the projected duration of time off for the injury? So that form is helpful not only for us in guiding payment of benefits for the claim, but also the bureaus. They use that for staffing and transitional duty assignments. So we want them to use our forms for that purpose. So the MCOs provide a breadth of services for us, and the statement of work is kind of the basic thing, the basics of what we want them to provide as we enter into contract negotiations with Majoris. They may have some additional services that we think would be helpful, and we would want to look at that as well. But this is the basic services they would provide, and a benefit to us contracting with them. Any questions on the statement of work?
Trustee Kramer, I think you had initially submitted a question. Do you want to ask that now?
There's a comment about statement of work, and the comment about that specifically was I just thought it was really well written, thorough, clear, and detailed, and well done. I had a couple questions about Majoris generally, but not specifically about the statement of work, Catherine.
Do you want to just go ahead with, you want to go ahead with that? Is this a good time for that, Kim?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, Kim, I have two questions for you. One, and that is, we think that Majoris will be heavily used. I think according to the materials that you circulated, and I want to know what you think about that. And I'll hold my other question if you want to address that one.
Sure. So Managed Healthcare Northwest was the most used MCO. We have Providence and Kaiser. Typically, our members will select the panel that aligns with their preferred provider, your personal health care plan. The majority of our members went with the legacy MHN Caremark plan. And so we assume that that majority is going to continue. So that's really it. We think most of them will sign on. They have a broader panel of providers, and the other two MCOs don't have some of the providers that our members like to go to. So we already know that Majoris has some of the providers that our members prefer to treat with. So that's an add. We won't have to move many of them away from the MCO. Well, MHN is closed, but they will be able to continue care with their providers they currently selected.
I'm going to piggyback on that question. I think you answered mine, which was, so Kaiser, someone doesn't have to be enrolled in Kaiser for their personal health care to choose a Kaiser physician for their occupational disability. They could choose that, but you're just saying it tends to be more common that whatever system of provider you're using on your personal side, you tend to want to go with.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And they do occasionally select outside of their PPO, but generally they follow that pattern.
Okay, thank you. Tom, I'm going to jump into Trustee Kramer. I'm going to jump in with another question, not knowing where yours was, but I'm curious, since it sounds like Majoris is a larger organization than MHN was, do you have a sense of where, at least in Oregon, where FPDR fits in terms of size of client? Are we on the larger end of their clients or small, just to get a sense of what kind of priority service they'll be giving to the members?
Yeah, I think we're smaller because they have SAFE, which is a major insurance carrier here in Oregon. They've got SAFE and some of the other larger insured and self-insured plans, but they've got a good reputation for attention to detail with each of their clients, and so we expect that level of service, even though we're small.
Okay,
and we were small relative to their other clients, and we were with all of the MCOs. That holds true with MHN, Providence, and Kaiser.
And because you mentioned SAFE as a client, my follow-on question was their experience in working with, safety employees, police and fire. Sounds like if they're working with SAFE, they undoubtedly have many industrial clients.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A quick follow-up to who their customers are. The City of Portland Risk Management, which handles workers' comp for all the non-fire and police employees, they are finishing up their contract with Majoris. We chose to go our own route because we are a different plan and with different expectations, and we didn't want to get lost in the city contract. They wanted their own.
Okay, so from that sense, City of Portland and FPDR, we get to ride the coattails of the larger employer, City of Portland. With Majoris, obviously, they will want to make sure they give excellent service to FPDR, if for no other reason than to make sure that they're seen in a good light by the City of Portland, I presume. So.
Absolutely, and I would dare say we probably are going to use them more even than the city.
Okay.
Would more broadly, just by nature of the types of injuries and the demands of our firefighters and police officers. So, yeah.
Trustee Kramer, you had another question and I stole your time there.
No, I think it's actually tangentially related to what you all were just talking about. In the negotiations with Majoris, Kim and Sam, were there issues that we were on which we were not successful, or were the concessions that we did get that would be helpful for us as trustees to know about?
We haven't actually entered into contract negotiations formally yet. We wanted this resolution and permission to do so first. And, but what we expect, because I have been in communication with them for months now, and what we expect is that, I don't think there are going to be any real surprises in terms of what we want and the services they're going to provide. These are pretty universally known services for managed occupational health care. So I don't expect any surprises, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't want to downplay all the pre-work that Kim has done. I mean, even though we haven't formally done the negotiations, we've probably done 90% of the work for the negotiations. So we're moving into it. So statement of work is not a surprise with them. And then you'll go into Appendix A for the fees. They're not a surprise for it. I mean, there may be some fine points as we go through. Usually what happens with negotiations too is there's a lot of boilerplate wording that gets put into it. And that we like to hold a little bit toward the end so we can get the major statement of work agreed to and the costs agreed to. But then the attorneys on both sides go back and forth on the boilerplate issue when we have our procurement. A department helps us with those negotiations, and there may be a few decisions to make, but they usually aren't material, but sometimes they can draw out the process. But we've got them pretty much accepting the statement of work and the fees at this point. And get in negotiations, we'll firm that up and then get the boilerplate wording to them and have the attorneys dig through it from both sides, get that resolved.
Thanks for adding that, Sam. That's important. Yeah. So good. So I think next we'll look at Exhibit A, which is our cost projections for the 5-year terms that we usually have with our managed care providers. And this is just based on a few assumptions because we never really know until they've entered into until they've enrolled, and we've got a couple of years experience. Our calculations for fees with Majoris is more closely aligned to that of Providence and Kaiser, in that they charge a per member enrollment fee, and that's how they charge for services. MHN had a % of savings that they had negotiated with their doctor. So it was just a very one-off kind of unique way of doing this. This one brings us more in line with, again, a per enrollment type charge. And so what we did here, and with the help of Stacy, I want to shout out to her for that. We had a few different ways of looking at it, but our numbers were very close, which was very good. So what we did was we used a projected number of claims for fiscal year 23, and then for the half year 28-29, because we're already through part of the fiscal year. We used the average number of annual claims in the 5 years preceding the pandemic. The pandemic years were just this one-off, and the majority of claims during that time didn't require medical services, so we didn't want to use that in our numbers. But what we did with getting the average, which we have here at 344 claims, is then we made an assumption about usage. How many of our members will enroll in the Majoris MCO? 70% is our best assumption based on prior enrollment with MHN. And then we assume that the enrollment fees will increase by CPI each year. And this is from their price sheet. They had put that it would increase. So those are safe assumptions. And then we round it up just to allow for a higher claim volume, higher Majoris enrollment, or higher inflation, any of those factors that can change these numbers. So these are our best estimates for now. We probably will need a year or two to really tell what our costs will be. I think in years past, we've had to adjust the contracts a little up, because higher utilization means we're going to have more cost. And that's not a bad thing. That just means that our members are getting the services they need following an injury. So this is what we have at 450,000 would be our NTE for this contract. And any questions on that?
And just to clarify, the NT is not to exceed, so this will be
Yes.
written into the contract that for 5 years coverage, this will be the max amount that we can pay. We won't pay it. It's only based on usage. So this isn't going to be we're going to throw 450 at them. We're going to use this formula here that Kim has shown. And after a couple of years, we'll evaluate and see if there's more usage or there's some other assumptions that are incorrect. And we have with MHN a couple times come back to the board asking for a addition to the not to exceed, but that will probably, I think we'll have to have 2 or 3 years under our belt before we even want to come back and discuss this pricing with the board. And at that point, and we'll only do that if we expect the 5 years to exceed 450, but we won't know, like Kim said, a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, if we're off on our estimates at this point, or the usage changed more than what we have put here on this chart. We also have one additional thing that's happening, could put some stress on to these numbers, is that both police and fire, or at least police is going to increase the number of covered members, which is one of their goals. So that could give us some numbers coming up that we haven't anticipated. And we may see the same thing for fire. So if the number of covered employees under our plan increase, you may see an upward trend in the number of claims, which will put this here. Again, we won't see that for a couple of years, but those are some of the stressors that can happen to push this up above the numbers. But this is based on what we have for the assumptions now. Stacy and Kim and I all looked at this and agree that the 450 is a very reasonable target for a not to exceed amount for a 5-year contract with them.
Yeah, so any additional questions?
It's sounding like perhaps no more questions. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for us to approve resolution number 551 as drafted.
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Opposed? All right. Resolution passes.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you all.
Thank you very much, Kim. That was easy to follow.
Great, thank you.
All
Thank you all
right.
there. We will share a copy of the entire contract when it is signed with you, so you can see that, and you should see the statement of work will be in it, as well as the costs. Costs may be stated differently, but the NTE of 450,000 will be in the contract because that's what you've approved right now. So we'll make sure all the fees fit within that scale over the next 5 years, given our present assumptions.
Thank you. All right, should we go to the next information item, which is just upcoming meetings?
Yep, just the upcoming meetings. So in January, we have on here, we are going to adopt the budget. So Stacy will present the budget. She'll go over the new process for how we're doing the budget due to the organizational changes demanded by the charter and how the city is going to meet them. Action item B, you've just done that, so that won't be on there. Then we will have, for information items, the actuarial standards of practice, a memo from Lauren Dunhauer. He's drafting that memo as we speak, and we'll probably send it out to you before the meeting, and then he can discuss it during the meeting. I will do a disability pension review, take 2 hypothetical employees, one the city of Portland, firefighter or police officer, and then we'll take one who's a police officer and in a PERS covered employer, not the city, and just compare the two, how they work, so you can get the feeling how the 2 plans work. We'll discuss the administrative rule amendment process because we're going to present you some rules for approval in March. So we'll discuss what the process is, what we look at it. And we may do the FPDR strategic plan review. We're going to see how much time this takes at this point, and then we can push that off. It's not, so that's tentative at this time. There is one thing here also, is that in early February, the legislative session state legislation begins, so you will get a legislative update from me in January. I hope by that time I should have a good idea of any bills that impact PERS or workers' comp that are going to be presented. And so I'll just give you an update on that. So that's that time for next meeting, unless you all had some changes to that. Then in March, we'll do the annual adjustment review, the COLA. This will be for FPDR 2 plan. Stacy will present this. She'll also explain how a COLA is done for FPDR 1, and then FPDR 3 will give you again a recap of what PERS does for them. We'll do the administrative rule changes, and then we don't have any other info items other than our usual FPDR updates and the expenses to go over at that time. And then May, we have the follow-up if necessary for the COLA. Again, some years in the past, we took 2 meetings. That's why we start this discussion in March. We'll have tax anticipation notes, and then no other information, no other info items determined at this time. And then we had, these were on your list to do, was discussion of forming a committee to review the FPDR 2 pension plan, soliciting a study to compare the FPDR disability program to Oregon workers' comp. We'll do a board handbook review because we will be sending the update out here early next year. And then impact of unionization of FPDR staff. Just a quick one on that. They are formally starting their things on the City of Portland professional workers, and the city will start their negotiations in January. So we'll only do this once that contract is approved, then we can tell you what that is. So this will be an open, there's no set date except when the contract is done. So I don't know if you have any questions or ideas for the January one. Again, what you see here, 1B, we've taken out because we just said that. 1D we may push off, which is the plan review, and replace that with a legislative update for the 23 or the 24 short session.
Okay. My sense is the January meeting looks pretty full as is. So does any of you other trustees, do you have thoughts about some of those future meeting topics? If you have a preference for them being inserted in March or May's meeting at this point, or do you want to wait until next month's meeting to make some suggestions?
I don't have a feeling about it either way at this point.
Okay. Well, Sam, unless you have concerns, I mean, it strikes me that your comparative examples of the disability pension benefits might be nice for us to hear before we think about, then logically discussion items 1 and 2 for future meeting topics might fit in March or May after we've kind of heard from you on that.
Okay.
If you other trustees are comfortable with that, that would be my suggestion. Okay. All right.
And Chairman Cloud, can I just chime in a little bit on the budget just to give everyone a heads up? It is always a tight timeline to get the board. We always try to get you the official sort of budget documents that will turn into the city budget office and to city council, so that should you stumble across them, they won't look completely unfamiliar to you. But this year it will likely not be possible because they have pushed all the deadlines back for the citywide budget process as we're undergoing this charter transformation, and they're regrouping us into service areas, and there's none of which is really going to impact our budget. It will just sort of impact the process and the formatting and how things get put together. Doesn't sound like we'll even be able to be in the software systems until pretty close to the board meeting. So what we're going to give you will be, we're going to try to mock something up that looks at least somewhat like what we've given you in the past, and my presentation to the board will look very similar to what it's looked like in the past. I won't keep with that too much, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that the documents just won't look quite the same as they did in the past because we won't have access to them at the right time this year.
Okay, thanks for that heads up. I'm sure that's much more frustrating for you than it will be for us.
It's a wild time at the city, but they'd like to change the budget process every couple of years anyway. So it's not like we haven't lived through this before. We haven't lived through this exact thing before.
Okay, any other information items for today?
We have one thing here, and I thank you, Tom, for reminding us. This is something that I wanted to do. Wanted to acknowledge the passing of Dell Stevens. He was quite a fixture with the FPDR Bureau as well as the board, extremely involved. As you saw what I sent out in the early 90s or the late 80s, he was on the board of trustees, and he kept in touch with the board and contributed a lot of information and a lot of opinions and ideas he had for improving the plan. And you always want to thank him for always looking out for our members, always thinking the best of the members and making sure they got what he felt they needed and be provided for them by the FPDR plan. Sometimes he and I had differences of opinion, but he was always extremely professional in how he did that. He was very professional with the staff and always was very helpful and again, I wanted to thank him very much for his care and concern for the members and the support for the FPDR plan with that going forward. He will be missed. He's been a fixture since I've been here. He and I have had many discussions as well as the staff and as well as the board with him. And I had anticipated more further discussions with him this year and in the future about his desire to add additional benefits and caring for our retirees. So he will be missed, definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Okay, unless there's anything further, then I'm going to adjourn our meeting, and everyone have a lovely holiday season, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again in January.
Yep.
Okay.
See you later.
Thank you.
Happy
You as well.
holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.